Well, hello, friends. Welcome to episode 384 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. Every day talking about the most important issues that matter to you and your family, your community, your country, your planet. Smart folks always joining me as my guest. Today, I have got a brand new guest who's never joined us before. Very excited to share my conversation with George Zarkadakis. He's Greek. He's British. He's brilliant. His new book is Cyber Republic, Reinventing Democracy in the Age of Intelligent Machines. Wonderful conversation. I learned so much from talking to him. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Very impressive guy. That is coming up. Also, it is Friday. It's Finnegan Fridays, ladies and gentlemen, and it is also July 2nd. Kristen Finnegan joins me here to go over and recap the week and much more. And in this first segment, this first guest, it comes from our hangout last night. It's Eric Segall stopped by on Thursday nights. Stand-up subscribers are always welcome to a virtual hangout that I always host. And last night and some nights, some weeks, we have special guests. Eric Segall is a long-loved listener, subscriber, and one of everybody's favorite guests. He joined us to talk about the latest at the Supreme Court with a whole bunch of almost, 40 subscribers hanging out, stand-up members hanging out last night. Segall drops by, and we had a great conversation, and that is coming up. I hope you're okay. I hope you're hanging in there. I hope you're going to have a great 4th of July weekend. I'll be taking the Monday show off because dropping my second daughter off to camp and staying up there on Sunday night with Val and I. I'll be back here with you on Tuesday. But thank you very much for your support. Sign up now for a subscription, patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or just go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. I'm here every day of the week. 2 guests almost every day, and a whole robust, comprehensive news segment Monday through Thursday. Thursday nights, I hang out with you. I did last night, and I took this 15-minute segment or so with Professor Eric Segall at Georgia State University, who's a con law professor, and this is the part I want to share with you now. Here we go with Eric Segall, Christian Finnegan, and George Zarkadakis. Time to stand up.
I can sum it up in like 2 sentences. You want me to do that?
The court sucks?
Well, yes, that we knew that before this morning, though. So there's a federal statute that unequivocally and unambiguously prohibits states from treating minorities worse than others when it comes to voting rules. There is no question that Arizona's voting rules treat Native Americans worse for various complicated reasons. And the court ignored all that and made it very, very difficult for anybody to prove voting rights violations in the future. They knew they were doing that. So and it was 6-3 with the 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats. And what that means is these lawsuits in Georgia and other places that are challenging the new voter restrictions that will also make it harder for poor people and people of color to vote will be upheld for an extremely narrow reading of the most important federal law ever passed, maybe the Voting Rights Act, one of the 5 most important federal laws ever passed. So Kagan, in her dissent, goes crazy and says, well, you're just rewriting a statute. You're not interpreting the statute. You're making it not what it was supposed to be because, and this is the key, and then I'll say the next thing and then I'll stop. The key is Congress knew in 1982, when it amended the Voting Rights Act, that what states did from 1890 until 1982, basically, was every time there was a voting restriction struck down by a court, they would just do a new one. And they would change it a little bit. And the litigators could not keep up with these changes, all of which were designed to hurt people of color from voting. And so what Kagan was saying is these new things, these anti-vote harvesting, and voting in the wrong district rules, and all of that, those are just today's ways of making it harder for minorities to vote. And this statute was about the courts stopping that. And the court not only didn't stop it, but it made it much harder in the future for plaintiffs to prove that a violation of the statute occurred on the same day that, based on nothing, they strike down a Cal law requiring charities to close their major donors. Some public policy objections to the California law. I cannot swear to you I would vote for such a law. I think it's probably good on balance to make charities disclose their big donors, but there are reasonable arguments against that, and that's why we vote. That's why we vote. What the Supreme Court did is it struck it down under the First Amendment. This law has nothing to do with speech, has nothing to do with association. You can speak as much as you want. No one is forcing you to speak. You can associate whoever you want. So the court struck it down based on nothing in the face of a case, the voting rights case, where there's a federal statute directly on point that the court completely bastardized and diminished. So it was just a terrible day. And this is just Republicans doing Republican things. And it's just the court doing things unrelated to law. And it just confirms everything I've always told everybody here about the Supreme Court of the United States.
Well, that rant was brought to you by sunflowers. Sunflowers, folks, plant them in the spring, watch them grow while other things die, like democracy. Sunflowers.
I was reflecting, since you and I have known each other since 2010, I believe, maybe 2008, but certainly 2010, other than Obergefell and Windsor, the two same-sex marriage cases, every time I talk to you, it's like bad news. It's like I'm always Mr. Depressing guy.
Not true. Not true.
Almost time, because the court just continues to do horrible things. And it's been doing it for a
lot of truth to it. But usually we're getting a story about your kids or a guinea pig. But
I posted a Queenie today. He was so upset that he had to rely on Lucy for support.
Your dogs, yeah, we're pretty broken up about this. All right, so I have one question, and maybe somebody else has a question. But my question is that, I think Elie Mystal was tweeting about it tonight. It's like, even if Congress were to pass one of the two big pieces of legislation to protect voting rights, this decision basically says, even if the legislative branch wants to protect voting rights, the Supreme Court will uphold the challenge.
It doesn't say that, but it does allude to it. Alito does throw in something at the end where he basically says, if we interpret this law what he's really saying is, if we interpret the law as Congress passed it, then it might violate states' rights to control their elections. I guess states get to control their elections, but not the charities that do business in their state. I mean, it's just all devious bullshit to hurt poor people and help rich people. The Koch brothers the Koch brothers company brought the disclosure suit on the California law. The two cases are so interesting because in one we have text directly on point the court ignores, and in the other case we have no text and the court makes something up. And what both cases have in common, they help the majority and they hurt minority. That's what the court does. It's what the court has always done, except for 12 years, 1960 to 1972.
Any questions or comments before we let Eric Segall go back to probably watching and tweeting about basketball? Nick DiFabrizio.
So, Eric, I agree that even if they passed a new voting rights law, whichever one you want to call it, the John Lewis, whatever, that there's going to be a potential challenge that under constitutional grounds that this court might enforce. So how would you draft the law to give it the best possible means of success? I mean, like in broad terms, you don't need to,
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because any law that does real work is going to be looked at by these Republican justices as suspect. Prior to 1982, so in the Supreme Court already one time interpreted Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which was an issue today, overly narrowly, and said you had to prove intent, which wasn't Congress's intent. So Congress amended the law specifically to overrule that decision. Right. I don't see any meaningful voting rights legislation, both at the federal or state level, really, getting past these justices, if in fact the result is it makes it easier for people of color to vote. This Supreme Court does not want people of color to vote. They just don't.
I feel like after every comment, John Carroll should just have to belt out like one note.
I'm good with that.
John, could you just...
We're fucked.
Christine Thomas, we've got to do this bit like at least two more times. Christine, you're on the air with Eric Segall, who is one of those people who zooms and holds the phone so it moves around, or he refuses.
It's not moving. I call bullshit.
Oh, something's moving. All right, Christine.
Okay, so my question is, do you think that this is a message to Merrick Garland? And do you think that this blows his Georgia lawsuit that he's filed on the voting rights in Georgia, or how does it affect it?
Well, it definitely affects it, and it makes it much harder. What Alito? So you have to remember that I'm going to use a word to describe Alito that I wouldn't use to describe Roberts or Thomas.
All right, well, hold on. Whatever word you use to describe Alito, John Carroll then has to sing.
Perfect.
All right, here we go.
Alito is a scumbag.
Ooh. Scumbag.
So he wrote this in a way that basically allows lower court judges to deny all of these lawsuits, and he knew he was doing that. All six Republicans knew that was the result of it. Christina, makes a huge difference in those lower court cases, and it depends on the judge. If you get an Obama judge, if the Georgia lawsuit goes in front of an Obama judge, Georgia will lose at the district court level. But then it'll go to the Court of Appeals, controlled by Republicans, and they'll lose there. And then the court will either take it and affirm it, or they won't take it at all. Don't look to listen, folks, this is my message. It's been my message to Pete for 10 years. It's been my message to Planned Parenthood for 20 years. Don't count on the courts. For the courts are not our friends. The courts are almost never our friends. Protest, picket, civil disobedience, register voters. The courts are not our friends. Unfortunately, many of my colleagues don't understand that.
Well, John Carroll does. John, don't count on the courts. The courts are not our friends, are they?
Courts are not our friends. Well, I knew the other day when Bill Cosby was transferred to Mar-a-Lago.
The Bill Cosby thing is complicated. Let me just tell you this. Whatever you read about it, it is a very complicated question.
What's not complicated is the lawyer in question here is the same guy named Bruce Castor that represented Trump in his second impeachment, which makes him Dershowitz bad, I think. I don't know. No, because you have to be uniquely Dershowitz to be Dershowitz bad, because it's a combination of being smart and being bad. I don't think that lawyer is particularly smart. No. Dershowitz is a really smart
cam footage, and what's amazing about it is that if you watch it, and I really
thank you for sharing Chris Hayes with my podcast right there, RJ.
I don't know what that was. That wasn't me.
That was a recognizable voice to me. MSNBC's Chris Hayes. I was just finishing up recording this for tomorrow, and that ruined it. Now I have to go out and edit that out. Son of a bitch! It was almost perfect. Now I'll keep it in there now that I talked about it. Well, Eric, we will let you go, I think.
Yeah. Tomorrow we can talk about. I'd like to talk about the history of this.
All right.
This is 1857 all over again. It's 1880 all over again. It's 1920 all over again. It's just
all great. Great years. Great years.
Hey, Eric, real quick, do you have an opinion on the child slavery one with Nestle? I think it was.
I don't. I have not. I'm sorry, but I'm not.
And that's like 8-1.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it enough, and it's not my area, so I really don't.
Where are you on child slavery?
I'm generally against it, except for my children.
I don't even know.
Thomas wrote the opinion, the winning opinion, so it's bad.
Almost certainly.
High Court backs Nestle Cargill in child slave labor suit. What the hell is this about? I didn't even hear this.
I glanced over it. I want to say 2 of the people that was in the lawsuit were shipped out to do labor, and they sued.
Yeah, but it's not about that. It's about technicalities of this federal statute, and it's really complicated. I honestly can't talk. I mean, I could talk about it, but I don't consider myself an expert on it, so I don't want to talk about it.
Well, all good questions. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. And
everybody have fun. I'm going back to my childless home. My girls are at summer camp, and Lynn and I are living the life.
Oh, it's just a sex fest over there. All right, enjoy.
Thank you, Eric.
I didn't say that.
I did.
Yes.
Kids
All
are
right,
gone.
goodbye.
Enjoy. Every room, buddy. Every room but theirs.
Bye, everybody.
All
Good
right.
to see y'all.
All right, there you go. Goodbye, everybody. We talked for another hour and a half. We had a lot of laughs last night. I loved John Carroll's contributions there. By the way, you got to stand up. John's new song available everywhere. The links are in today and every day's show notes. All right, let's move on now to my second guest of today's show. It is Finnegan Fridays. Comedian Christian Finnegan joins me every Friday. I can con him into it. He is on Twitter at Christ Finnegan. He is a nationally touring, headlining comedian. You've seen him on The Chappelle Show, Best Week Ever, the sitcom Are We There Yet? He's a writer. He's what I call a cultural commentator, too. I'd love to hear his thoughts on all things cultural and politics and you name it. Love talking with Christian Finnegan. We had another great conversation, and here is where we started right now.
This might be condescending to say to you when people do it, but it's like, since you don't have kids, like, does that already irk you a little bit or not? Are you tweaked?
When people say, then people comment on me not having kids?
I'm telling you a story that I'm not sure that you would necessarily get as much because you're not with kids trying to role model.
I mean, sometimes it gets under my skin, but they're correct. They're correct. I mean, there's no two ways about that.
I don't know. Maybe it won't be in the situation, but if I see...
It doesn't get under my skin. It doesn't. That's not the right word. It's sometimes so, you know, I don't, as long as people don't sort of lean on it as a crutch to sort of imply that their lives are worth more than mine.
Oh, that's all I was going to do. Forget what I was going to say then. The idea that as an accomplished and respected artist comedian, you deserve to get paid whatever you think you are worth. And I think that that's how we should look at artists to a certain extent. If there's not a money question, what I've tried to teach my kids is if some street performer is doing something really great, or if someone is performing live music at a restaurant, at the bottom line, we clap when they are done. At the bottom line, we appreciate what you've just given us. But generally speaking, you give them a couple bucks because they've just performed for you. To me, that has always felt like the right thing to do, to pay attention to an artist when they're there performing for you, generally speaking. If they interrupt you when you're on the subway or something, maybe we can argue. But generally speaking.
I would agree with that. It's like, you know, if they're encroaching on, you know, what is traditionally private time or private space, then obviously you don't owe people money or even attention or whatever. But my feeling is, if you are giving them your attention, if there's a subway performer that you find yourself engaged in and watching, I think, the very least you could do is, you know, clap or show some appreciation. And I think that things have value. You know, people talk about capitalism and all that jazz. Are we on right now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I understand people who think like that capital is not the proper way to sort of allocate worth in a country or a political system. I understand all that, but it's the way we have right now. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're walking down the street or if you're on the subway car and a bunch of dudes get on and start singing doo-wop, or a few kids start breakdancing, or somebody's playing mariachi music and it brings a smile to your face or brightens your day in the slightest, the least you can do is show them your appreciation with applause or a smile or whatever. But really, at the end of the day, the internet, you know, the sort of universally recognized way of showing your appreciation is with a bit of money, you know, and you can say that that's not the way it should be, but it's the way it is.
But the problem now becomes increasingly, although I'm sure these entrepreneurs are ahead of us, you might need to earmark carrying cash for that reason. Because if someone just comes on the subway and does doo-wop and you're like, do you take Venmo? Do you have a Square? I mean, like nobody carries.
It's only a matter of time. It's
Seriously.
only a matter of time before like the guy finishes a song and then walks around with his iPhone with a QR code, just sort of showing it to
Holds
people.
up a sign with his Venmo address. If you like this, send me a couple bucks. I also find
you might do better that way if people didn't have to fish through their pockets. They already have their phones in their hand anyway.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody's done it. I'm sure sure they have psychological research on is it easier? For me, it's easier to part ways with electric money than it is actual cash.
Of course. It's numbers on a screen.
That's normal. I'm not weird.
I think, I'm much freer, with I don't know what's in my Venmo account currently. It's all kind of vague and nebulous.
Lots of other things I want to talk with you about this week. How's your health? How you doing? Are you recovering after the open heart surgery? It's been almost a month out. Yeah,
it's been 6 weeks. Wednesday will be 6 weeks, so 5.5 weeks since the surgery itself. And yeah, I mean, it's officially in the annoyance stage of things. In that the ways it is holding me back are more annoying than tragic or dramatic. Or even interesting. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I rolled over in my sleep on my chest and it hurt. And it took me 45 minutes to fall back asleep. Like that kind of stuff. Or, oh, I tried to lift something. And then after about a block of carrying it, I realized I shouldn't have lifted it. Like it's in that phase. And I still, though, if I take a big, deep breath, I can very prominently feel my heart pounding. To the extent, it makes me feel like maybe my lungs are pushing up against something, so that's a little disconcerting, but I was told that it's not a big deal. And so I I choose to believe people whose business it is to know these things.
So there's still some kind of residue of physical pain there.
Oh yeah. Well, I get tired really quickly. If I have to run up and down stairs twice in a row, I'll, all of a sudden I'll realize, rushing through the 42nd Street subway station to get from one train to another. I've had to a couple times be like, you know what? I'm just going to let that train go because I'm just not going to kill myself. Literally or figuratively.
What's your apartment situation? Stairs, elevator? What floor do you?
Just stairs, but just one floor.
One floor.
One floor. It's before we were on a fourth floor walk up. So this is a walk in the park.
Yeah, I did that once for about a year. It's annoying if you forget something. It's like you
in college for 6 months. I lived on a 7th floor walk up.
Yikes!
Which isn't even legal. I mean, there was a pre-war. It was an old building in the West Village, and you can't even do that now. Anything more than 5 floors, I think you have to have an elevator.
Yeah, you got to really be prepared when you depart because you don't want to forget anything.
Well, and you tack it on to your trip mentally. That is just you just know, I'm not home when I get to the front of my building. I'm home when I get one floor away.
And if you live on the 7th floor of a 7th floor walk up, you consider a pulley system for groceries. I mean, who wants to carry a bunch of heavy bags up in addition to your stupid body?
Well, let's just let gravity take care of things.
So what about mentally, emotionally, psychologically? You kind of mentioned you take a deep breath. You think, oh, but that can generally spin out of control for me.
It's, I'm just sick of it more than anything. I'm sick of being in pain. I'm sick of being in discomfort, but it doesn't feel, any sort of euphoric joy I felt at the little things in life has dissipated. I'm not going to lie. I wish I could have held on to that sort of childlike wonderment I was feeling the first week that I got out of the hospital, but it's fine. I mean, it's just annoying. It's just a drag, I can't work out. And so I can't, and God forbid I change my diet. I mean, that's not on the table. So I mean, I am trying to diet, but it's just I
have some shame, some eating shame. My daughter and a friend, after I picked them up from their little day camp, volleyball day camp. Why did I have to say it's little? 3 hours. It's in a place.
Did you say Bible?
The Bible. They both go to a Bible camp. We're trying to open her mind because we're
interesting.
Volleyball.
Jesus Christ. I did not want to react in a way that put you off because, who knows? Maybe there's pieces of the Dominic family lifestyle that I had yet to unlock, but that would have sent me for a loop there.
No, we've talked
volleyball.
Enough. You've got it pretty well unlocked.
How about volley Bible, where people just sort of toss a Bible over a net back and forth?
Yes,
and do like scripture, quote scripture as they throw it over. They're like, "Make shall inherit the earth," and they throw the Bible over the net.
You know that exists. You know that at Bible camp they have sports, and it is incorporated throughout.
To the patent office.
Do you believe Donald Rumsfeld is in hell?
I don't believe in a hell.
I know. That's what I was going to get to. Wait, hold on. Let me go back to eating shame thing, because I do want to ask you this. I did want to ask you this. And maybe that we lose people on this.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe some people
Eating
don't
shame.
eat fast food, but we went to Chick-fil-A. And I don't go to Chick-fil-A because they're notoriously like anti-gay or super Christian and all that. So I don't. But I'm also a person who doesn't completely boycott something like year round. Like I wouldn't ever go somewhere. Like I moderate my kind of, and my daughters never go there. This is in a place that we don't, this volleyball camp is, so we don't ever, they wanted to go, fine, we'll go to Chick-fil-A. And I ate there was a line there, Christian. I know, and I see this all the time at the Chick-fil-A's and I hear about it. And similar to, there's another place called Shake Shack. And what I really seriously, I'm not trying to be funny or anything. I don't understand like the major difference between a chicken sandwich at Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A. We can argue about that and we can have fun. We can have fun with it. It's better here in the bread and this and that. But I just like that the fact that there is a line, and speaking of capitalism, they had their employees walking up to each car, taking the order. They're just pumping the chickens out, tortured after one after another. Anyway, I just don't see the difference. There isn't
a difference. I'm telling you, this is this sort of weird mass psychology that people have, that they get something locked into their head and they just accept it to be true. You know, Shake Shack, you know, which is a small chain here in New York City, but, you know, like Chick-fil-A, like you were saying, it always has lines out the door.
Oh, is Shake Shack regional?
Oh, well, I think it's, I could be wrong about that. But anyway, I know there's one in DC. So, I mean, I at least one in DC. So maybe it's a national thing, but it's not a widespread thing. I do think it started here and then expanded from, I could be wrong about that. Please don't Google that. But it's a burger. It's a burger. They're French fries. It's really not that big of a deal. And the same thing with the chicken sandwich. It's like, dudes, there's chicken sandwiches available. And okay, maybe that chicken sandwich is 8% tastier than the chicken sandwich at Wendy's or, you know, Popeyes or whatever, but worth 45 minutes in line on your lunch break at work. It's just this weird mass. It's like people, you know, it's like a cultural meme that when Chick-fil-A opened in New York City, there was this cultural meme that was like a massive deal, and people kind of buy into that. And people will, in order to not feel like they've been conned or that they've wasted their time, will almost tell themselves that they believe that. Right. I think. Right. They'll eat the chicken sandwich and they'll tell themselves that it's so much better, because to admit that they've just been sort of the victim of a sort of cultural fraud is too awkward. So that is my opinion.
I totally agree with that. I've never thought that deeply about it, but that's why I asked you the question.
I think macro about these things.
I like that, and that's why we're so happy that you're here with us. But I do have to show you. I'm going to show you, talking about capitalism, talking about efficiency, and the idea that you could, you know, make as much. How do you make as much money as you can with whatever product or service you're selling? That's not a forbidden question to try to figure out, but the way that they create efficiencies, in this case, in a fast food chain, it's always been impressive since fast food was invented. But today it started raining hard, and there was a long line. We were waiting in a drive-through line, which is also, you know, for me, not great, because you're just wasting more gas sitting there idling. Here we are waiting in line. It starts pouring. And I said, now these minimum wage people are going to get soaking wet because they're out here taking everybody's orders. Christian, they have little pods, umbrella homes. They're wearing them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm showing it to him right now, and I'll include a picture.
They're like portable tents. Like those are what those are is they're like camping outhouses is what they are. Because I was trying to buy my wife a camping tent, and you can buy, they're like zip up. They're meant for you to like take a poop in or to change your clothes. Like if you're camping or at the beach or something, for you to be able to change your clothes in. But yeah. Do they have armholes in them?
Yes. No. Oh, wow. No, wait, I don't know. Their arms are inside. So I saw the woman came up to the car next to us, and she's taking the order, and the woman handed her cash and some coins dropped. And she couldn't bend at the waist because she was wearing this thing. And she had to ask another Chick-fil-A employee who was not wearing a pod, could you could you get that? And I interviewed the lady, and she said they're really actually to protect the iPads that they're taking your order on, not the employee.
Of course they are. Of course they are. And, you know, and then you see these people who are like, oh, people don't want to work. They want to stay on that unemployment teat, and they don't want to. It's like, right. Yes, because this is the work you're offering them, and you're offering it to them at minimum wage, which you don't even want to raise.
Well, both answers are right. Yes, because of what you just said, but also they do too want to work so badly they'll wear a fucking portable tent.
Yes, you're right.
Humiliating. I was humiliated for them, how stupid they looked. I shouldn't. Who cares what they look like? But they looked stupid. If you made me wear one of those to take your chicken order, I would demand a higher wage because I had to wear a portable tent while I'm taking your stupid fast food order.
Mm-hmm. It's demeaning in the most literal sense. You know,
yes.
It is dehumanizing.
Yes.
I mean, quite literally in this case, because they just look like they look like neon green grimaces.
Yes.
Sort of shuffling around awkwardly through the parking lot.
You got, folks, I'll include a picture of it.
Yeah, please include the picture because I feel like people need the visual to understand just how stupid they look.
I'm only putting it in the subscriber email, not for everybody else. If you don't pay for this podcast, you won't get that picture. You'll get the best of Christian.
But you won't get that picture for content of that pedigree.
Let's talk about Donald Rumsfeld and Bill Cosby. Let's start with Cosby.
Speaking of pedigree.
Let's start with Cosby. What was your relationship with him as a comedian before you found this, out about his truth? Did you ever hear rumors?
Well, sure. I mean, but I was right in that wheelhouse of kids who kind of grew up seeing Bill Cosby himself. I mean, there's probably no stand-up special. That I have seen as many times as I've seen Bill Cosby himself. When cable TV first started to become a thing and sort of made its way through the suburbs, they only had rights to about 20 movies, and so they would play them constantly. The Beastmaster, I remember, is one of them, starring Mark Singer and John Amos and Rip Torn. It's a classic, but they showed it all the time. The movie FX with Brian Brown and Brian Dennehy.
Yep.
Grease, they played quite a bit.
Smart.
Eddie Murphy Delirious was one of HBO's first things, and Bill Cosby himself. If I've seen it once, I've seen it 40 times. Have to be. Like there's section of it that I remember, not because I memorized it, but just because I saw it so many times, it just worked its way into my DNA. And then obviously the Cosby Show came along and became the biggest thing on television. And so, I mean, I'm sort of smack dab in that wheelhouse of people who should and kind of did worship Bill Cosby. But, you started to hear things. I mean, everyone always uses the Hannibal Buress call out as sort of a point of demarcation. And it's true that's when people kind of woke up and were like, hey, yeah, but we'd all heard for like 5 years leading up to that. We'd heard these stories, and all these accusers and his use of, and also that he there's a lot of material where he talks about Spanish Fly, like an awkward. I mean, that's just the idea that we all heard about Spanish Fly and accepted that as a normal part of life is bizarre now. You're like, there we go. You put something in a woman's drink and then she passes out so you can fuck her, right? Hilarious.
Yeah, a lot of things are bizarre now. Yeah, I first heard of it because when his run on the Cosby Show and the CBS, a friend of mine was an actress and was cast for an episode, and at the curtain call, live tapings, he sexually assaulted her. He grabbed her ass.
Wow.
And she came and told me, and she was so shaken. And I reached out to her, when all this was happening. I was like, I could corroborate that. I remember you telling me that if you wanted to go public. And she's like, I'm good, which I respected, fine.
Yeah.
But still.
I mean, I can understand the panoply of, I don't even know if that's the right word, whatever the range of women's experiences are to that kind of thing. I can understand. I can say, I can understand somebody wanting to shout it from the rooftops. I can understand somebody being like, I'm good,
right.
Anywhere in between.
So him being released from jail yesterday, because of a technical issue regarding the prosecution and a deal that was potentially made, and so not as much the Supreme Court's fault. Hard to kind of understand, but most people aren't going to take the time to try to understand it. Most people are just going to jump to if you're wealthy and powerful, there's a different set of rules, which is not always true. I'm not so cynical. I mean, a lot of wealthy, powerful people do face penalties and consequences, not nearly as many as should. And so this plays that idea out longer. And now the suffering for his victims, or survivors, as they sometimes like to be referred to, is back. I played a couple of clips of them talking about the trauma and how they both felt immediately sick because it was a shock. So what are your thoughts on all of that, on him getting out at age, whatever he is, 83?
I mean, it's a tragedy, obviously, for not just the women who were directly affected by Bill Cosby, but women who have had experiences that, ran along the same lines as that of those women. It's got to have felt like just a slap in the face and just so exhausting and so tedious, from a personal perspective. And this is a privileged point of view. The thing that annoys me the most is just all the apologists who are now going to come out of the woodwork and be like, see, he was innocent. I mean, you can already see Cosby doing it, but all the fucking dipshits, many of whom were comics that I dealt with, who didn't believe any of these women in the first place, of thinking that he is somehow vindicated. And you don't have to do a lot of reading of what the decision was to understand he is not vindicated in the slightest. His guilt has not been called into doubt whatsoever. A bullshit offer of non-prosecution was made by a former prosecutor who, of course, then later became Trump's idiot.
Crazy.
It's insane how small the world is and how so few people are fucking it up for everybody.
Well, hold on a second. Maybe it's just like sometimes the worst people end up taking on the other worst people's cases. You think of like Dershowitz, or I mean, he's actually done some really good things in the past, I should say, but a lot of high-profile, horrible people that he defended. This guy Castor defending Trump, Giuliani defending people. A lot of these guys just take on the worst people for whatever reasons. So maybe. Well,
I mean, there's a lot of prestige in that as a lawyer, right, to sort of win the unwinnable case and to sort of defend the indefensible, whatever. But the fact that this guy made a sort of agreement with Cosby originally that he wasn't going to get prosecuted, and based on that, Cosby waived his Fifth Amendment rights and incriminated himself, and some of that information was later used to convict him. And so I understand it. I don't like it, but I understand why that conviction could be overturned. But the guilt is not in doubt, and it enrages me that I'm already seeing people on some people on social media, Felicia Rashad, like a great injustice was finally undone today. It's like, no, there was, it just makes me upset that people are going to draw conclusions from it that shouldn't be drawn.
My dog wants to get out. Excuse me. I don't know if you heard that.
It's all right.
Well, I also wonder where the general Trump supporter comes down on this. He's a black man, but he's a powerful man, but he's also a man, and these are women accusing him.
Oh, I think that whatever is the thing that pisses off the libs is the position that they take.
That's a great answer. Yeah.
So I think that they'll be 100% pro Cosby in this particular case.
Today, Rick DeSantis met with President Biden in Florida over the building collapse. And DeSantis and Biden kind of spoke highly of their cooperation. And DeSantis, there's video of him saying, you have been right on top of this, Mr. President. We appreciate your support. And Twitter, right-wing Trump Twitter went off on him, calling him a cuck. And it was just so funny. And it's just that.
Yeah, it's the Chris Christie Obama hug all over again.
Yes, the Chris Christie. The idea that you would acknowledge, this was a lot of it, seriously, that he's actually the president was the first problem. That you're sitting down next to him and acting like he's the president, that was the first problem. That you're then saying a nice thing, that's a second problem. And Christian, I just worry that, wow, that's where we're at. That is a pretty bad place.
Yeah, I mean, for these people, and I will say not just for sort of MAGA Twitter, but also the left, or liberal Twitter or whatever, that there is the culture war and there is nothing else, and I think it is important to remember that there is also the day-to-day running of shit. when you are in public service.
Yeah, vaccine rollout.
Not everything is ideological in the sense that if a tree falls in your house, some of that goes out the window,
right? At
least for a while, but to give any quarter to admit that there's any room for cooperation is a slippery slope in the minds of a lot of people. And I think social media has definitely entrenched those battle lines harder than they would have been 30 years ago. I think it would have been, and I don't think it's because people are worse now. I just think that there's this thing that exists now that didn't exist then, which is the ability to broadcast your nonsense 24 hours a day.
That's a great point. I've been thinking obviously a lot about that, having been attacked for, over a week now. It comes, it goes, mostly gone. But are these people worse?
What about the twerking thing?
Yeah, being called a pedophile, 40 times a minute. And I'm like, are these people worse? No, it's exactly as you just put it. It's the path that they have to anonymously say what they say. I feel like my test of a person is, like, I want to say to any of these people who've been attacking me or anybody else, and I say this is my threshold too. What I'm about to say or tweet, would I say it to the person's face, and would I want to be in a dialogue and have a back and forth? That's generally my test.
My strategy, and it's a losing strategy. I want to be very clear about this. It is a strategy that has done me no good professionally, but my general approach to social media is, if you could weird science a human being, and I may have said this to you in the past, if I'm being redundant, I apologize. If someone could weird science a human being based solely on your social media tweets, like all the information they had to create a human being, to Frankenstein a person from scratch, was the shit you post on social media, would you hang out with that person? And if the answer is no, what are you doing?
That's a great, I'm going to apply that test as well. I like it. Let me ask you, before we wrap up, about Donald Rumsfeld. I want to get to that. That's the story. So Donald Rumsfeld died yesterday, and that's the story that I've been, it was a big news day yesterday, thinking the most about. I talked, and covered that war and dealt with so many different veterans organizations, and I've read so many books and interviewed so many experts for over the years, and I think about it all the time, post 9/11, all of it. And Donald Rumsfeld dying yesterday brought up a lot. I can't stop thinking about it, and I'm trying to find your exact tweet that you wrote about him, but you didn't hold back at all. Let's just say that. Where is the tweet? Now that he's a rapidly bloating corpse, I have to admit, I have something to admit about a recently deceased piece of shit, Donald Rumsfeld. I kind of understood what he meant about the known unknowns thing. In that tweet, you did a number of things. You let us know what you thought about him, and you somehow made it funny, because that is a really interesting and funny observation.
Well, I'm sure that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know what the known unknowns thing is. I mean, that's, if there was going to be a 5-line obit on Donald Rumsfeld, that line would probably be, quoted, where he was talking about, the Iraq invasion, or, at some stage of in the first year of the Iraq war, I believe. And he was talking about how there are known knowns, and there are known unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. And it was very awkwardly phrased, and people have kind of raked him over the coals for that for years. But I understood what he was trying to get across. He was saying, it's like, there's things we know, and there's things that we know that we don't know. But then there's things that we don't know that are so outside of our purview that we don't even know to ask about them. You know what I mean? That it's like, yeah. And that's the sort of nature of war, which is why it is important to not get in a fucking boondoggle just because you see an opportunity.
It's the nature. Yes. It's the nature of strategic planning of any sort, of corporate planning, of a product rollout. It's definitely the nature of foreign policy and diplomacy. And you explain that so well, by the way. The fact that you could recall that quickly is why we love you. But as you said, that's not, you don't commit the entire force of the United States military if you don't know those things.
Yeah. Or you certainly don't act fucking smug about it. And just, act with complete and utter confidence, with no no humility whatsoever. I mean, if the Atlantic ran just a brutal review, an obituary on Rumsfeld yesterday, which highlighted not just his
George
cavalier
Packer's piece?
attitude. I'm not sure who wrote it.
I just shared the George Packer's piece from the Atlantic.
It probably was George Packer. Yeah. But just the complete blithe nature of his evil. The sort of leveraging the collective rage everybody felt at 9/11 to accomplish these sort of idiotic, Halliburton-backed sort of U.S. global dominance fantasies that he had, and to just act like it was a fait accompli, that anybody who had the temerity to question the Bush administration's forays into the East Village was an unserious person who was beneath any sort of, honest conversation.
All of which were corrected. He was not, and they were not.
Yeah.
And yet, they maintain credibility because it's not just Rumsfeld. As all of these cartoon villains die off, we will have to think about the evil and horror and I mean, I can say torture. He literally was the one person most responsible for passing off on torture. And how do we talk about people after they've died if they were the world's worst?
Yeah, I mean,
honestly,
I was uncharacteristically blunt about my opinions about him yesterday because he's in that core group of people who I truly don't give a shit if his family's upset. I really don't. Like, my general philosophy is to not speak ill of the recently dead, not for them, but for us, that we're all going to die someday. And it's going to be ugly for most of us. It's going to go slowly, and it's going to be an ugly, humiliating grind. Very few of us are struck by lightning and, everything's just over. Death is an ugly, very human process that we're all going to go through. And so generally I like to let people mourn, whatever. I don't need to throw dirt on every fucking person who dies, but there is that select core group of people. If maybe more than any one single person who wasn't president of the United States, Donald Rumsfeld is probably responsible for American decline in the early 21st century.
Yeah, because if it matters what the rest of the world thinks of you. Mm-hmm. It also matters
so much flows from that.
It also matters what the rest what people think of you. It matters to you what the comedy industry thinks of you. You can act like it doesn't matter to me what people think of me, but it does matter because there's a lot of truth to what people think about you, and it has to do with how you've carried yourself throughout your career. It matters what the people that you like, love, respect think of you. Let's not act like it doesn't. And so that applies in the rare instance when these analogies do, I think, to diplomacy, to geopolitics. The entire world saw what we did in Iraq and was aghast by it. And so were a lot of Americans, to be fair.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it probably seems to someone who's in their early 20s now, it probably seems like everybody just kind of went along with it. Mm-hmm. But there was a pretty robust anti-war contingent. I mean, they were laughed at and they were dismissed, and you were thought of as being
canceled.
You were canceled way more than anybody has ever canceled in 2021. That's for sure. Yep. To sort of come out against the war effort was verboten.
After we had been attacked, they take down 2 of our buildings. They attack the Pentagon, and you're going to criticize and ridicule the American reaction, the American leaders. You hate America. You're horrible. They could not understand that.
That's what it was for 5 years between 2001 and 2006. Yeah. And
I always hated that shit because I guess it's the definition of virtue. But it's like, no, I lived in New York City. I knew people who died. My city was attacked. Yeah. My home was attacked. You're out in fucking Arkansas, living in the middle of nowhere, not in danger. And so I'm sorry, but my opinion matters more about the reaction to this, because I don't want to be in a target. I don't want
I care more.
Well, that's why, all these people they talk about, like Glenn Beck had that bullshit 9/12 project, wherever, I want to come together like we all came together on the day after September 11th. It's like, no, we didn't come together. You started saying we because you wanted to use our tragedy as collateral for your bullshit war effort.
Yes, to sell t-shirts.
That's why in your mind that we were all Americans. We were all Americans because you wanted to bank on the shit that we had to go through. To do what you wanted to do.
I could talk about this forever. I want to ask you a final question, which is kind of about the weather, also about climate. You're in New York during this horrible heat wave, challenging heat wave.
Very shiny and pasty as we speak because the air conditioner's in the other room.
How do you feel about kind of using the temperature to give yourself permission to not work as hard?
I
feel like it's just too hot to really do anything but sit in front of a fan, which I could also do with my laptop and do all kinds of work. But
my psyche seems to take the decision out of my hands often. It's my decision to not get a lot done is not usually a conscious decision. It's just I look up, it's like, holy shit, it's 6 o'clock. It's not like I'm like, I deserve this. It's just I'm just get into a fog for 4 hours straight. But it's hard. I mean, and I think that might be one thing about the whole work from home culture that people haven't fully factored in, where they're like, oh, where it's always cool? The office.
Yeah.
What I mean? Like
people sit around with blankets.
Yeah. So I don't know. By the time September rolls around, you might see people be like, I think I'm ready to head back into the office now.
It kind of, it always really gets me depressed and emotional when we have this horrible, like really insufferable weather extremes. And I think about like the future and how a lot of it's baked in and how that's going to be for my kids or their kids. It's a really, and so many listeners talk with this. A lot of people are talking about it now. This, the emotional impact it has on your, it's just a hard thing. It's just such an existential threat and idea. It's a really hard thing. And we end up getting really upset by it. I get upset by it.
I mean, this is probably one of those things where we were talking before we got on the air, or maybe right when we got on the air about having kids and not having kids.
Yeah.
Whereas, it terrifies me and it is a mortal danger, but I know it doesn't really affect me directly. Or even my family directly, because I don't have children and, 40, hopefully 40 years from now, I will be off the table and I won't be around to really stress it one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, it's a weird sword to have hanging over your head every day. This idea that's like, oh, this is just going to probably keep getting more problematic.
Yeah.
And I don't think people fully and again, I'm not trying to be all gloom and doom, and I'm sure most people have thought about this, so I don't mean to be a bummer, but it's not just the idea of the weather getting hotter. It's the idea of, okay, let's say the sea level rises and people live on the coasts. Say there's a half a mile along the coastline of the United States that is no longer inhabitable. Well, where are those people going? They're going inland. And then those people then there's going to be fights about, where those people go and who's going to get fucked. Of course, the poor, as always. But, I said, as if I really knew where I was going there. I had nothing. I literally had nothing.
I thought maybe that was the case, but I wanted to leave you out there. I
thought by the time I said, something brilliant would pop into my head and I would really be able to put a button on that.
And it's funny because you've conditioned me and this audience that's the case. So I trusted you.
And you trusted me. And to my credit, I called myself on it because I could have just said something. Absolutely. I could have thrown out some word salad.
Well, the truth is,
acted like that was deep.
The truth is, you verbalize the exact kind of exercise that we go through on our heads, and then what? And the truth is, we don't know. That's why you didn't have anything else to say, because we just don't know what to do, and that's why it's so tough to grapple with psychologically. It's hard to put a button on. There is no button.
My sort of cynical silver lining is that the Exxon Mobils of the world are all secretly sitting on technology that will save the day, but that they're not going to employ it until it is financially viable, like until literally the hail is falling from the sky and lava is flowing through the streets. Right. That there's so much investment going on. They're going to find a way to make a buck off this. Yeah. Somebody will swoop in at the end and save the day in a way that's demeaning and immoral, but it'll happen.
Before we let you go, give us a reference: music, movie, TV show. You're always good for all that. You were tweeting about a musician just passed from a band. I don't know. Who can you turn us on to here at the end? Music, TV, movie. Okay. Well, music wise, you don't have to do all of them, whatever you want. Okay. Well, the band I had referred to is this band Hum, who was kind of a 90s one-hit wonder. They had one song that was a hit called Stars, but they're kind of a big guitar space rock kind of band from the 90s. They only have 3 or 4 albums, I think, 4. And they went on like a 20-year hiatus. But if you like sort of just loud, kind of hazy guitars, like the term shoegaze gets put out a lot, which is sort of a musical genre where it kind of makes you like stare at your shoes because you're kind of like, it's almost like you're drinking cough syrup. It feels like you're drinking cough syrup and a little like hazy. But the drummer of the band Hum passed away today apparently, and they are a band that I quite love. And so if you like the idea of big guitar music and you're not already familiar with Hum, they had a comeback album they put out last year called Inlet, which is super great, and you'll know in about the first 30 seconds whether it's your thing, because the first song out of the gate, you'll either be like, oh, I want to hear more of this, or no, thank you. I will play that as we say goodbye here. And I'll make a decision how I feel about it very quickly. Thank you very much. I always love talking to you. Finnegan Fridays. We so appreciate. Any other plugs? Anything else? Any dates? Anything you want to mention? I'll put them in the show notes too.
Yes. Cambria and I went to see, if you're in New York City and you have time before the show ends, Jacqueline Novak, who is a comedian that you may know or may have known. She was kind of more in the alt comedy world, but she has a solo show playing at Cherry Lane Theater called Get on Your Knees, and it is all about her teenage adventures with blowjobs, and it is the smartest, most interesting hour of comedy that I've seen in a long time. I saw a very early version of it 3 years ago at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, but then now I've seen the real spit shine version, and it was fucking fantastic. And so, yeah, Get on Your Knees at the Cherry Lane Theater. Jacqueline Novak, I would check that out. If you're in New York, check that out.
I'm just seeing it on Twitter. He looks awesome. I'm not familiar with it. That's hilarious. Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure's mine.
And there he goes. Christian Finnegan at Christ Finnegan. Finnegan Fridays every Friday. Please let him know that you enjoyed that conversation. Send him a tweet. He's always really active on Twitter. And support him live. He and I are going to try to do some dates together. And we'll let you know, of course, when that's going to be. July 26th, I will be with JL Cauvin in Boston, everybody. So check that out. I think there's tickets still available. One show only. A lot of listeners I know are already definitely signed up for that, coming from some pretty far distances as well. So maybe I'll stay up there for a couple of days and we'll party. Who knows? A couple weeks away. July 26th, Boston. And there should be a ticket link in the show notes as well. Keep forgetting to put that in there. At City Winery. You can go on my Twitter or JK Cauvin, JL. Okay, JL Cauvin's JKJL Twitter and get the tickets as well. All right, let's move on to my final guest of the show. I learned a lot from this brilliant guy who joins me for the first time ever on the podcast. Every week you hear from new voices, some of our favorites as well. Well, this is a new voice. He is a writer, he is a science communicator, an engineer of artificial intelligence, a futurist, most importantly, and a digital innovation professional who also writes books. And his new book, fascinating, super important. It's called Cyber Republic, Reinventing Democracy in the Age of Intelligent Machines. And I love his little affect. Normally I don't, but when he says okay and right, I love it. Here now is my conversation for the first time on Stand Up on Twitter at Zarkadakis, George Zarkadakis. So I just want to read a description of your new book to scare everybody before you give us all the answers, sir. Here he goes.
Around the world, liberal democracies are in crisis. Citizens have lost faith in their government. Right-wing nationalist movements frame the political debate. At the same time, economic inequality is increasing dramatically. Digital technologies have created a new class of super-rich entrepreneurs. Automation threatens to transform the free economy into a zero-sum game in which capital wins and labor loses. But is this digital dystopia inevitable? Well, joining me now is the author of this excellent and important new book, Cyber Republic, Reinventing Democracy in the Age of Intelligent Machines. George Zarkadakis, did I say your name right? Welcome to the show.
Spot on. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me.
So you study for a living the future of pretty much everything. Tell us a little bit before we get to the book and the answer to all those big, scary questions that you cite. Tell us a little bit about your work and how you got into it. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
So originally I'm Greek. I'm sort of Greek-British. I live in Europe between London and Switzerland. My background educationally is engineering and artificial intelligence. That's what I did a PhD and have worked in information technology for a number of years and media. As of late, I've been doing a couple of things that are very, very significant in terms of the book, meaning that I work for a big consulting organization. I lead our practice around future of work, which means, we work very closely with big organizations that are introducing technology in their workplace. And we help them understand what is the impact on human capital. So this is perhaps one of the triggers, if you like, that led me to start sort of thinking more broadly, what does that mean, for employees in companies, but also for independent contractors and for society at large. So I'm working, let's say, between, understanding the impact of technology in society and organizations, and also developing AI systems and developing technology to, I guess, offshoot the negative aspects of that impact.
How many languages do you speak, sir?
So I speak relatively well 3. I can get away with another 2.
So Greek, English, and
French.
And French.
Yeah.
And the other 2 that you get away with are?
Italian and Spanish.
And then you must speak another language, a digital language, like coding or something. You must speak, do you understand the language of AI? Is there a language there?
So there are computing languages that, folks use in order to code for AI systems. There's a range of languages. Python, for instance, is one of, a very popular language. Another one's called R. I'm an old fellow. I used to code in something ancient called Lisp and Prolog. So yeah, we speak to computers. They speak back to us. All
right. So staying, we're going to talk about it. I think they might be speaking for us too much is one of the concerns, right? You and I are on an airplane. We've never met, and you tell me a little bit about, and I say to you, I hear a lot about AI and what it is. Is there any short version or brief way to explain this? Because it's so hard for even the most intelligent folks to understand kind of what we're talking about with AI. We all have our different ideas, but it's such a huge, it's taken over in all of our lives and we don't even know it. How would you explain that to me on a plane, and what are we drinking?
I'm drinking water, mate. I guess the easiest way to explain it is that we're trying to make computers behave as if they're human, right? I think that's the easier definition that I can come up with. For instance, us humans behave in a certain way when we need to take a decision, right? We go through a thought process, we weigh things, we have our biases, we come up to a decision. Or us humans, when we hear the voice of a person, we either recognize her or don't, and when we see a photograph and so forth. So it's those, what they call cognitive functions that we have as human beings that are really, really hard and perhaps unique for humans that computer scientists are trying to reproduce in the computer. And that's what AI is trying to do.
When you talk about the impact on human capital, those words, again, are a little bit highbrow. I mean, you're talking here about
people.
People's lives and how technology affects our well-being, our ability to make a living, make money, how automation affects our industry, our personal job, our lives.
and a lot of really good things too, probably in terms of healthcare and opportunities that folks didn't used to have that now do. But to me, the big concern is the ethical concern about AI might make me a whole bunch of money, but it might destroy this entire industry. Well, you know what? I don't care. What's the conversation around that? Because I feel like you're leading it.
So there are at least, I'd say, two topics of problems around AI, if I can call it that way. One is the impact of AI on the economy, on work, on jobs, essentially. What does that mean? And we can explore that a little bit. And the other area, I think, has to do with what does AI mean in terms of our society, of our democracy, in terms of, for instance, surveillance, right? Our lives being probed at by AI algorithms that collect our data and the spying on us. So I think those two areas are the ones of where we have the highest concern, certainly in the West, right? Are AI systems going to steal our jobs? We're going to find ourselves unemployed. How are we going to make a living? And are we watched over by some big brother who might be the government, or most likely, in our case, some private organization?
Right.
And why? And what's going to happen to it? What's going to happen to all that?
A lot of people across the world are having a debate or learning more about a debate between kind of privacy and security. And people are all across the range, obviously, on that. But we're also talking about economic opportunities here and how AI can help us there. I love watching. I mean, I'm loving reading this book. It's fascinating and so important. And talking to an expert who thinks about these issues all of the time, has researched them and written about them. The future of blank, which is what you cover, is so important. And I'm so happy to have you joining me. I hope everybody gets the book. But I also enjoyed watching you online, your TED Talk, your YouTube talks, really have a deep understanding, it would seem, of the problems that plague humanity and the planet. I wanted to just get your take on diagnosing the issue around liberal democracies being in crisis and right-wing nationalist movements, as you say, framing the debate, but on the rise, although we did see in France some setbacks for Marie Le Pen and that movement. We've seen some setbacks in the U.S., but it's anybody's game, is my opinion right now, George. What is your diagnosis of the issue with liberal democracies versus authoritarians and autocrats?
So my position, Pete, might be a little bit different, perhaps, than one might expect. Okay, let me explain to you what I mean by that, and I'm trying to explain that in the book as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to give you the very condensed version right now. So the system that we call liberal democracy, there is a design around it. And the design can be found in constitutions, by the way. It's not magical. It's not invisible. You can read a constitution like the U.S. Constitution or some other constitution, and the design is there. And the design is all about how we balance things in our society. And most importantly, how we balance rights and democracy, right? Because there's a tension between the two, in fact. And that was at the top of mind of the founding fathers of the U.S. Constitution and others. Because you see, if you have democracy, this traditional sort of way of taking decisions in a collective way, the majority always wins. So if the majority, for example, decides that, okay, we're all straight and the minority are gay and therefore we'll outlaw, a gay marriage, right? Then what happens to the rights of homosexuals, right? So
well, I can tell you, because a lot of states in America can answer that question, unfortunately. Go ahead, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just giving you one example.
It's a great example.
All kinds of examples.
Sure.
Like take another example. The recent example of true democracy in the UK was the Brexit referendum. Referenda are true democracies, an instance of true democracy. And what we had there was that the 52% voted in favor of leaving the EU, but that automatically meant that it reduced the rights of the 48%. So that's the tension we're speaking about. So yes. I'm concluding, mate. So what happens with liberal democracy? The prerequisite for this system to work is that citizens should not get involved in politics, right? Because once citizens start getting involved in politics in a heavy way, then this whole edifice of liberal democracy starts breaking down. And I think that's the problem that we have right now. It's not the problem coming from the right wing or the left wing. What is the problem is that we have in cyberspace, right, in chats, in social media, in places, we have huge conversations taking place of people, discussing all kinds of things. And that is something that liberal democracy is not designed for. And that's where the tension is. And that's at least how I understand it. And that's why in my book, and it's not just me that says that, lots of other people say that, we need to change liberal democracy so it's more inclusive for citizens. Because right now, as citizens, we don't really participate in the policy making, right? We're just like viewing a theater of politics playing out there, but we're not really participating.
I think since I discovered your work, I've kind of felt like this relief in a way, because I want to muddle through something for you, and because I think that your work answers this. I often say to people that we try to label each other. We try to, it's like we're dogs. We sniff around each other real quick. Is he liberal? Is he conservative? What does he think? Is he a woke? Whatever, is he a racist? Whatever it is, like right now, everybody is sniffing around each other and trying to then quickly categorize that person so that I can protect myself. In some cases, from ever having to hear their ideas. My answer, though, is I don't know what I am. I don't know what I am. I don't think this current form of democracy that we know and this current form of economics that we know is working. And I'm not talking about American capitalism. I'm talking about throughout the world. And then I would further go say, and we don't have anything from the past that can help us with the present or the future, because the past never considered the technology that we have now. What your work is you're taking the technology that we have now and applying it to the economies, the societies, and the democracies that we have. And I would argue what you're trying to do is give people more of a say and more representation. I think it's easy probably to mistake that if you don't listen closely to what you're saying. But that's how I see it. We don't have past philosophies on political or otherwise that really can inform the future, because what we are living with right now with technology, with all the things that you understand intimately that I have no idea about, blockchain, cryptocurrency, AI, that's why someone like you offering something like citizen assemblies is fascinating, because that's the thing I don't know. That's the thing that we don't have. So moving the ball forward, how am I doing describing what the problem is and that we don't have these answers from the past? And we shouldn't put ourselves in a label. I'm a communist. I'm a capitalist. No, I'm somebody who wants to figure out what the fuck we're going to do with the fact that robots are taking over. They're not going to be jobs. And there's a lot of opportunity here for us.
Oh, absolutely. If you think about the political system that we live was created at the time where the most innovative thing was the printing press. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, civilization has moved forward very fast. We're 200 years later, we have the internet, which is an amazing thing. It has, created enormous new opportunities and challenges. So we need to adapt to this new world, right? And this new world is bringing a lot of challenges and opportunities, obviously. The big challenge, I think we all know that, is that people are hungry, and there's a lot of rage in the internet, okay? Because everybody, is shouting at each other, nobody's listening to each other, right? So how do we change that, okay? So how do we become citizens? Because you see, we think we're citizens, but we're not. A citizen is someone that has a position, but also wants to listen to the other guy, right? How can we listen to each other when we disagree? What's the magic formula? So I think we have to solve for that first. But there's also another problem that you mentioned it, okay? There's no point in having a democracy unless there's equal opportunity and there's some sort of, security and safety, economic safety for people, right? I mean, what's the point of having a democracy when everybody's poor, right? You can't have a democracy actually like that. And, my old, Aristotle, old Greek, he said that, right? In order for democracies to work, you need to have, most people should be like in the middle class. You have to have some rich people, maybe some poor, but you can't have all poor and very rich. Because what you're going to end up with, either the rich are going to take over and you're going to have an oligarchy, the rule of the few, okay, over the many, or the people will revolt and they'll put a populist leader in front of them. And we've seen that happening over and over in history. In both scenarios, democracy fails, and we are worse off. In both the scenarios, we're all worse off. So we need to fix how we are participating in political decisions. So that's the citizen assembly thing that I'm referring to. So we become more active, okay, and also train active listening to each other. So we don't shout over each other. But we also have to rethink our economy. Okay, so it distributes the value that's created mostly through data and AI, through those intangible assets, more fairly to everybody. Okay, otherwise, our societies are simply not sustainable in the 21st century.
Well, take that a little further, why are our societies not stable if we don't rethink, for example, our economies?
Well, for two reasons. Well, I think for one reason, because the trust, the social contract that binds people within a society is already broken and is going to be torn apart to smithereens and pieces. Okay. And that's what's going to happen. Okay. So that is why not sustainable. We don't trust others. We don't trust our fellow citizens because they are Republicans or they're Democrats or the left or the right. So they're just like another sort of tribe. Okay. And we don't want to talk to them. We don't trust our government because they are sort of conspirators. So we don't trust anybody. Okay. And at the same time, we're getting poorer. I mean, this is not a sustainable future. Certainly not.
You had this great, thought, or the way that you worded it, basically when public discontent is ignored, everything breaks down. It would seem that public discontent is ignored in communities across the globe, and things are breaking down in certain countries and certain communities within certain countries. And then it would seem that where people do have their voices heard in more affluent communities, things seem to be going pretty well. There really is a major stark divide across the planet from the UK to the US and everywhere else. It's easy just to focus on your home. How do we rebuild trust so that public discontent is not ignored using the technology that is available to us?
So in the book, I'm exploring a few ideas on how to do that, both in that space of improving our politics and getting ourselves more involved and therefore having a more truly democratic society, but also in terms of how we share the spoils of the digital economy. Okay. And these are sort of two different topics I'm exploring in the book. So in terms of, how do we get ourselves more involved in politics and at the same time become depolarized? Okay. How do we move from a highly polarized society to a society of consensus? And consensus, by the way, does not mean agreeing in everything. It means agreeing to something that we can live with, okay, which is really important for societies. Okay. So how do we move towards consensus? And there are experiences across the world over many decades, tools that people have used that show us the way, things like what is called deliberative democracy, citizen assemblies, which is, a very simple idea. I'm describing it in the book. It's many people are doing it, Ireland, France, bringing citizens together, for instance, right? That are sort of, reflect the demographics of a given society in terms of, age group, gender, race, whatever, bringing them together and having them discuss a subject, okay, that is important for society. It can be something very simple, like, for example, how do we prioritize funding, let's say, on welfare, on benefits, to something more complex. How do we, rethink our constitution, which is what happened in Ireland in 2016, just before the 2018 referendum. So it can be anything like that. And this is what's called citizen assemblies. And citizen assemblies have a tremendous power to do two things. First of all, show how people with completely different points of view, highly polarized, pro-life, against life, whatever, right, can come together to a consensus once they start listening to each other, once they start getting into a process of dialogue, real dialogue, especially with what people you disagree, okay? And the second thing, which is even more amazing, is that when other citizens who are not participating in the citizen assembly follow the deliberations of the citizen assembly, listen, observe, they too become depolarized, okay? Because they're not politicians, you see. And we do need politicians, by the way. I don't want to get rid of politicians yet, okay? They're a necessary evil, if you like, okay? Right. But we do need something to complement our system of government right now, which has to come from a grassroots, has to come from citizens themselves.
It's hard not to stay on just one of these questions, but I want to cover as much as I can with the time I have and talking about your book. When we talk about the future of work, what do you think about the current labor movement in the U.S., which is different, certainly, than the rest of the world, where it's more respected, more understood? But, organized labor is a long issue that we can talk about. How important is labor organizing using digital tools that are available now and in the future? It would seem that it's going to continue to trend towards supporting the idea and the concept and making it easier to do. But I have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, George.
So let's start from organized labor. I think one of the reasons why there's so much inequality is because of the collapse of the labor movement, right? So why the labor movement was so instrumental in society.
Is that across the world? Has the labor movement collapsed similarly around the world?
I'd say in most places in the world, in most, at least Western democracies, definitely not in the private sector. The public sector has obviously some strong unions, but they're a different case.
Right.
All right.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But in the private sector, the unions of workers are not as powerful as before. And here's the problem with that. Unions, because they pressed companies for better wages, it meant that companies really needed to innovate on human productivity. Okay. And that's what created more wealth, created more human productivity, better salaries, more efficiency. Once you remove that pressure from companies, what companies tend to do is that they just look at cost and they're trying to reduce cost. That's it. They don't care about human productivity that much. Now, this is a very important thought, Pete, that I really just want to highlight very, very much, because it has to do with the role of technology as well. So AI systems right now, most of AI automation, what it does, it automates human tasks right now, things that humans do, okay? And that's good for companies because guess what, right? They can remove the humans and put the computers in place,
right?
All right? And that does not create new opportunities, does not create new jobs. It just removes work from the equation, okay? But there are some AI systems, and I would like to see more of AI focusing on tasks that augment human beings. Just to give you an example, Google came up with an algorithm that can do something amazing. It can fold proteins. Okay, like what does that mean? Folding proteins, right? So folding proteins are essential to drug discovery. Right. Mm-hmm. So understanding how proteins fold, the way, that molecule sort of twists in space, changes what it does, essentially. Right. So it's very important to understand it. Now, without AI, it takes months and years to do that. Right. Humans are total experts. They need a lot of time to do it. With AI, their productivity is massively increased. Now, this is a case of AI that human productivity, gets a huge augmentation. That is what creates new jobs, and that's what creates new opportunities, right? So that's how we should take AI away from, removing work from people and removing people from work into augmenting people at work and therefore increasing the productivity. And that creates new wealth, and that creates new need for services, and that creates new job opportunities for everybody. That's how we create a virtuous cycle in the economy rather than the opposite.
I feel like there are different schools of thoughts on how technology affects employment throughout the world, throughout history, and right now. In terms of, I talked to my friend Bob Rice, who I think is really smart on these things. He says that what we're going through right now is unprecedented. It's not like anything before. Technology is increasing at a rate, what is it, Murphy's Law, exponentially over and over and over. We've never seen anything like this. We've got to understand that and talk about universal basic income and so on, which you write a lot about. And then there's other people, I think his name is Kevin Kelly, who's highly respected on this type of stuff in the world. And he says, no, this is just like the rest of history in terms of, yes, we have all these new technologies, but these new technologies come with creating new jobs to support them. I don't mean to make it binary. I'm positive you don't live in a black and white world. How do you explain where we're at now? Is it like this time it's different, or it's no, technology will continue to create jobs and it's not nearly as much of a concern as my friend Bob Rice thinks it should be?
So I think there is truth in both those arguments. If we look at history, whenever we had a technological disruption where technology came in and really disrupted the labor market, we tend to have what is called the hollowing out of jobs. That's the term. And if you can imagine what hollowing out means, is that because of technology, you have many jobs that are high value, they pay very well, but that you need high skills to do. So you have many of those jobs. And then you have, on the other side, many jobs that are not very well paid. They're very low skilled. So you've got plenty of jobs on those two sides. Where you don't have is in the middle, everybody else, right? You have a collapse of the middle class, essentially, right? Taxi drivers, for example, okay? Which is a semi-skilled job. I mean, you need to know how to drive a car. But if we have automated cars, you won't need taxi drivers anymore. Just as an example.
Can you give one from the past? You're talking about something right now. What about something like the past? Something with horses and cars or something? The cotton gin? I mean, what's something where this has actually happened?
Like horses. There was a huge. There was like, I don't know, 3 million horses in the States at some stage, or maybe it was in England, right? And you had the stables, you had the whole industry around that, which collapsed. Okay, but it was replaced by the car industry, of course, which created more jobs. So you do have those two effects called the displacement effect, where you lose jobs, and the compensation effect that you create jobs. So the question is, will that phenomenon recur with AI? And that is the question. So my answer to that is that it will, providing AI augments human productivity. Okay? It will not happen if AI simply automates tasks that don't augment productivity. Okay? So to give you an example, paralegal. Okay, so you're a lawyer, all right, and you have, some paralegal staff that do a lot of reading and summarize stuff for you. Okay, so you can take to court. Okay, so you hire 3 people there. Yeah. All right. Right now we have technology that you can completely eliminate paralegal jobs. All right, you have technology that can read tons of papers and summarize them. So you don't need those 3 paralegals. Okay, those paralegals are gone. Have I, as a lawyer, augmented my productivity? The answer is no. I'd still get the same service. I just don't need 3 people, if you see what I mean, right? Okay. What would have augmented my productivity would be some kind of AI system that works with me and gives me scenario, perhaps, of how the court might evolve. Some more advanced service that I can't have right now. That would augment my productivity, and then I would probably need to hire people in order to do the extra work that I create.
I guess what I just don't understand is the ethics of it all. In a world where the next quarter is the most important thing, you want to eliminate every cost you can. So Ford and Amazon are incentivized to eliminate all the humans, and they're getting better and better at it. I'm surprised Amazon hasn't figured out a way to, eliminate the humans in the warehouses to pack boxes and so on that want to, in I think it was Alabama, create a union, and that was a huge impediment to them. But how do you talk about, what do you think about the incentives for Ford and Amazon that would change that equation?
So there are clearly some industries where automation is, it's going to happen almost 100%. Manufacturing, for instance, even when I hear politicians say, we're going to onshore manufacturing, of course you will, but there's not going to be anyone working there, right? It's going to be fully automated. I mean, China is not going to onshore now from Vietnam as well. So what we see is clearly we're moving away from sort of an agricultural manufacturing society into a services society, okay? And that's where the jobs will be created. At least that's where we want the jobs to be created, okay? Not in manufacturing, not in agriculture, and I'm sorry, not in logistics either, right? All those industries are fully automatable, and they should be fully automatable. There are industries of efficiency. They're not industries of creativity. Okay, so wherever there is efficiency at stake, of course, we need to automate. It's where we need creativity, where we need, imagination, where we need essentially the added value services where only humans can deliver, that we need to create new jobs.
But the problem, of course, becomes too many humans, not enough jobs, and we know what that leads to.
So maybe the problem is that we're going to have less and less full-time jobs in the immediate future, but there will be plenty of work, and I think that is the problem. The problem is how we ensure intermittent employment, essentially, contract jobs or 0-hour contracts, as we say in Europe, right? How do we ensure that people can live comfortably and have security in a labor market that is going to be mostly based on contracts? Okay. How do we ensure, for example, there's health security, insurance for everybody? Yeah. Okay. and benefits. I think that's where the design needs to take place right now, because otherwise people will be stressed all the time, right? And angry. And we go back to the problem of democracy then.
Yeah, I mean, that's happening right now. I mean, that's the problem we're trying to solve for, and it just seems like the incentives aren't there for the power brokers who all need to be reading your book. All of them need to be reading your book. They need to be hiring you to consult them, I think. Talk to me about something I'm super curious about. I don't know who to believe. I don't know who to trust. I'm super confused about it, but also very interested on the future when it comes to the West versus China, which I know you can speak to. I mean, we're arguing in America about the dumbest things right now. I mean, transgender people using the bathroom. In China, they are inventing, the future of energy, of everything. And they just, as I like to say, and maybe this is racist, but they just beat a drum and people go to work and do what needs to get done. And maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about, but it would seem like they're a lot more efficient because of their lack of democracy than we are because of, I was about to say abundance, but because of what we have left of democracy. Here I am going to the binary again, sir. West versus China, the future.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. China is an important competitor when it comes to the future, indeed for the reasons that you mentioned. So, the Communist Party there controls the whole economy. There's no, question of privacy or anything like that, or freedom. There's nothing of that. I think what the Communist Party did successfully is two things. First of all, identify itself with Chinese nationalism. So it has sold itself as the party that ensures the glory of China. So Chinese people who may not be communists themselves are supporting the party for nationalist reasons because they love their country. That's number one. And number two is it managed to get a balance between capitalism and communism. Not really communism, like one-party rule, authoritarian rule with capitalism. So it opened up the Chinese economy so people can get rich, so people, market forces can come in and create jobs. And at the same time, it just completely obliterated freedom. And that's the Chinese model, okay? Now, do we want to live in that model? Maybe some of us do, by the way, I don't, certainly don't. I value my personal freedom very much. I don't want, in the middle of the night, some kind of, secret police coming in and arresting me, and that'd be the end of me. That's why I'm defending, democracy, and that's why I'm defending liberty, because I like the way we live. At the same time, I know clearly, everybody can see that the way we live needs to be completely rethought and redesigned, okay? We can't have, the super rich going off to space, for 10 minutes and spending billions of dollars, for a spin around the planet, and have like millions of us, I'm not including me, but millions of people, not having sure if they're going to eat a meal the next day. I mean, it just doesn't work. It's not only immoral, it just doesn't stand easy.
Right. No, I love that point. I try to make that point as well. But it's not that it's immoral or offensive. It's not working. It's not working for anybody. Yeah. No. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think I might have interrupted you there. So where do you see it going? I mean, how do we compete? If that's the word, how do we collaborate? If that's what needs to be done, how can we as a global community work together to solve the hugest issues of our time that you're writing all about, including climate?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, the West should continue engaging with China. Definitely. We should not, go back to the Cold War era. I'm old enough to remember, having drills with my family for nuclear attacks. I don't want to see anything like that happening to our children and grandchildren, God forbid. So we must engage with China. China is an important country. It's an old civilization. It's really, it's an important country, and I think we should collaborate with them to solve global issues. Clearly, there is a problem around data and AI that we need to solve, and AI is very important for the future of humanity, because based on AI systems, we'll be able to do all those incredible inventions that will help us, solve the energy crisis and so forth. And the Chinese have a clear advantage over us, and their advantage is that they can suck up all the data they want, train the algorithms they want in the best possible way, and we don't in the West. And this is one big problem. The second big problem that we have with them is that they have been quick to set up some basic standards when it comes to the new technologies for our cities, like, for example, what they call the 5G networks, and they caught us asleep. We were sleeping at that time because we were, just buying Chinese stuff. It was cheap. We were installing it everywhere in our infrastructure. And then one day we realized that, wait a minute, someone in China may have a kill switch right now, and it's going to screw us all up. So, so we need to do something about that pretty quick, I reckon.
So much more to talk to you about. You got a few more minutes?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. I haven't figured out your sense of humor yet, and I generally, it takes a little longer with foreigners. So we will, and we'll continue to find the humor wherever we can. I mean, I don't know any Greek British people, so that's really intimidating to me because I've been trying to make judgments of you, and I'm really having a hard time. So let's just talk about the future of money, which you write about. I have finally punched out on an issue where I'm like, I need to know about that. I need to bring on people to educate people about it. But you know what? No, I don't want to talk about blockchain or crypto or these things called NFTs, the future of money and assets. I have some weird issue with it. I need to get over it. Can you hold my hand like I'm a little baby? Like a tiny little baby, George, with a pacifier that doesn't understand this stuff and doesn't really want to.
No, you have to. Let me explain to you very simply, right? Okay. So Bitcoin and all that, just forget it for a moment. These are application of a technology. This technology that we need to all understand is called blockchain. Okay. So what is blockchain? We need to understand the technology because that's the important thing. And then we can talk about cryptocurrencies if you like. So blockchain is a tool that we can use. So you and I can transact without the need of a third party. That is it. That is as simple as that. Right. So when I say transact, I can sell you something and you can sell me something. I can give you money. You can give me money. We don't need a third party like, Visa, MasterCard, a bank. We can do it ourselves. This is called peer-to-peer. And that's what blockchain is. Now, this is amazing. If you think of it, if you think around a little bit, the last time that we humans did that was when we had a barter economy. Okay. When we would go down to the market, you have some chickens. I'll have, I don't know what I'll have. Maybe
you would have plums, sir.
I'll have some plums, and I'll take one chicken. I'll give you some plums, right? And we was like a peer-to-peer. Okay, we didn't need a third party. Right. We can do that, but you can't advance civilization with a barter economy, right? So once you start having a complex advanced civilization, you automatically needed third parties to ensure that our transaction was trusted. So we introduced the banker, we introduced the insurance broker, we introduced everybody, the government, all kinds of intermediaries. And the model works very well, by the way. Okay. But we all know that there are issues with this problem, right? The issues are cost. Okay. There's a lot of transaction cost involved. The issue is power. Okay. So if someone controls other transactions, let's say the money supply, if they have a symmetrical power. And what those guys, try to solve with the blockchain technologies, okay, how would the world look like if it was at the same time technologically advanced and at the same time it would enable peer-to-peer transactions? Okay, so that is the big hypothesis, the big experiment with blockchain.
Well, you did it. You did it. I listened intently and I understood what you're saying. And by the way, when you talk about its morality, I understand why my big brother, who is my moral compass, has always been interested in writing about thinking about blockchain, because I always just ignored it. And now you make it, oh, that feels good. Okay, what's next?
So the first application of blockchain, the one that became very famous, was Bitcoin.
Right.
Okay. So
Bitcoin is a form of cryptocurrency.
Cryptocurrency. I think cryptocurrencies, by the way, are Ponzi schemes. Okay. So although I love blockchain and I think it's an important technology to enable new markets and new ways of doing things. And I'm a huge evangelist of blockchain technology and the so-called Web 3.0. I consider cryptocurrencies Ponzi schemes, and they are Ponzi schemes. All right. That's what they are. But that's just an application I think is going to fade away in the next few years. And I think you will see more and more applications of blockchain in things that matter, in more important things.
The future of currency in general in question, and will we ever have a place where your reputation is a form of currency?
So some people sort of experiment with that. It remains to be seen. I'm not a monetary expert. I'm sort of a student, and I'm constantly learning, the meaning of money. And the more I learn about the meaning of money, the more I understand my ignorance. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather not have an opinion on that.
Well, you've just won an award here on the program because I always give huge respect to people who I think are really brilliant, like you, on a wide range of issues, who then say, you know what, on the record, while we're recording, I don't think that's my thing. Can we move on to a thing that is mine? I love that. My audience loves that. And at that point, let me just wrap it up here with one final question and say that is the moment where I say, I want to keep talking to this guy because he refuses to talk out of his asshole, which I am excellent at, if you want to take my TED Talk, but you are not. So let me just finally ask you about where you see, I just want to get your take. I don't think you really write about this or talk about, so maybe you don't want to talk about it, but I feel like the biggest problem is what I do, media, and the way that people are getting information. So right now, we in America won't even agree on who won the election, or even more importantly, or relatable for the rest of the world, masks. We don't agree on masks. We don't agree on vaccines. We have a lot of disagreement on things that are not happening. Like, I think a thing is happening and you don't. I don't know how to fix that. I blame mostly media. What are your thoughts on how influential American or other foreign media is on its countries? And I feel like everything you're talking about, everything you're writing about is kind of, it would be great if we could do that. But as long as we have the media informing people the way that we do, that Hillary Clinton is a demon eating baby's blood, and a certain high percentage of people believe that increasingly, then we're fucked.
Absolutely. So I gave a long lecture about this. So I'm going to condense it in less than a minute. Good. Okay, Pete? Yeah. So here's my thinking. Your question is all about what is true and what is not and how much we can trust it. Mm-hmm. Okay. A statement that someone tells, is it true? Is it not? Can we trust it? Mm-hmm. Okay. This is really the question. And that was not really much of an issue until the internet came along. Right. So I worked in the media in the 90s. Okay. And what you had there, you had authority from the media. Okay. So whatever was published in a certain newspaper, which was considered a serious newspaper by a serious journalist or a serious editor, was considered to be the truth. Okay. That's what it was. There was some authority. And that's what we are missing now. We're missing the authority that we used to live with in the past. Right now, there's no authority. Okay. Now, this is a problem that humans came up with. They faced 2,000 years ago. Right. And let me take you back to ancient Athens for just a moment.
No, I'll go there as long as you want. It sounds like a wonderful place. Because
you see, what happened in ancient Athens, they had a different kind of democracy, not the liberal democracy that we have, which is a very little piece of democracy every 4 years when we are allowed to go to vote. And the rest of the 4 years is what's happening in Congress, where there is authority. What they had in Athens is that, they had a bunch of people, there are 40,000 people like you and me, with no authority. Okay. And we had to decide what is true and what is not. Okay. All right. So this is exactly the problem we're facing now. We have an internet where no one has authority. Okay. No one is the king of internet. Right. Okay. And everybody has an opinion. So the problem is, how do we decide what is true and what is not? So that is exactly the problem they had in ancient Athens. Exactly the same problem. Now, I'm not going to go into big tirade now on how they solved it, but I think if anyone wants to find the answer to the problem, they need to look at how they solved it in ancient Athens, because they did solve it in ancient Athens. They managed to solve it, and in over 60 years, they created a huge civilization as well on the side. Okay? And one of the guys that managed to help the Athenians solve that problem was a philosopher called Socrates, okay, which is the father of Western philosophy, by the way. He's not just another guy.
Right,
okay?
Right.
And the problem he tried to solve is, how can you be sure about what you know? Okay. When you say to me, for example, that the US election was stolen, all right, by the Democrats, I don't know, by some Satanists, I don't know, by the aliens, all right? And you say that to me, okay, and you're convinced that this is true. Are you absolutely certain of that? How can I enter into a dialogue with you so you and I can agree that at least there must be some gaps in what you think? There must be some contradiction in what you think. How can I make you doubt, about what your truth? And similar, how can you make me doubt about my truth? Doubting about our own truth is the key to having a democratic society. The more certain we are about our truths, the less, the less ready we are to live in a democratic society.
So practicing the Socratic method is the solution.
The Socratic method, yeah. I think the Socratic method is the solution. We're just going to have to go and dust off those old school books, wherever they may be, and read them. Didn't
they poison the poor guy in the end?
Yeah, that's how you end up when you're trying to do something good to this world.
Sometimes. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Wow. Well, you're doing a lot of good in this world. How about that for a segue in conclusion? George, what an honor to be in your classroom. I'm really enjoying your book and learning about your work. I would love to have you come back and join me. I'd love to have you take questions in a live format if you'd ever be interested in doing that. The new book, Cyber Republic, Reinventing Democracy in the Age of Intelligent Machines. Go get it now. Well, it's not available till the fall. Is that right? Do I have that right?
No, it's available already.
Okay, get it right now. George Zarkadakis, such an honor to have you joining me in conversation. I hope I kept my head above water in it, frankly.
Oh, I had a great time, Pete, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Stand up. Yeah, there you go. What did you think of George Zarkadakis for the first time? He's on Twitter at Zarkadakis. Get his book, Cyber Republic, Reinventing Democracy in the Age of Intelligent Machines. And thank you very much for listening. That is today's episode of Stand Up. I'll be off on Monday for the long weekend. Is it a long weekend? I'm taking Monday off. I'm trying to take over a little bit of my life, dropping my daughter off, second daughter off camp, hanging out with Val on Sunday night in the Adirondacks, and I'll be back with you right here on Tuesday and every weekday. Tell your friends, support the podcast with a paid subscription. Welcome aboard to new subscribers, and thank you so much for listening. Also, you can always join us on the Discord platform where you're never alone if you're a stand-up member. There's always someone to talk to there 24/7. Love you guys. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend if you're having a weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Take it away, John Carroll.
Challenge, let the meek weak flee. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think your driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. This is the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Stand all right, up. We got to speak up. We got to reach up and voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.